Suppose you're going to a supermarket to shop for ingredients and food for dinner on a Wednesday, say. So you're shopping on Saturday because it's a weekend, but the meal you're planning is on a Wednesday. If you go shopping when you're hungry on a Saturday, you will feel that you'll buy more because you will feel, even on Wednesday, you will feel yourself as starving, or you'll think yourself as starving and I'll buy more.
Right.
If you go after a 7-course meal for shopping on a Saturday and you're feeling a little bloated, you can't imagine yourself starving on a Wednesday, so you'll shop less.
Nimesh, let me start with a very interesting question, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on that question. When it comes to investment and diet, you all make great plans on paper, but when it comes to execution, we all fumble it. The moment we see a sugary dessert, we all forget the healthy food. Can you just try to relate and just throw some light?
So interesting question, and I come across that dilemma quite often in my diet. So this question highlights an important part of what is self-control and discipline.
All right.
Let me again start with a small background story about this. Odysseus, as you know, was a Greek hero, a warrior, the mastermind behind the Trojan horse that won the Greeks the war against Troy. Odysseus, when he was coming back home, to his home Ithaca, he was warned that when you're passing by a few islands, one of the islands has some dangerous creatures called sirens. Now, sirens were creatures who used to look like women. They sang in a very melodious voice and a very with an enchanting music with it. The sailors used to get mesmerized or hypnotized by the voice, and they would move towards this island. And because of the rocks there, they would shipwreck into it. These creatures then would kill and eat these sailors. So obviously, when Odysseus was warned about it, he wanted to be prepared for it. He told his crew that you put beeswax in your ear so that you don't listen to any music or any noise when they are passing by that island. For him, he thought he could control himself better, but he wanted to listen also to this voice. So he said, "Acha, tie me to the ship, tie me to the mast of the ship, just to be safe. But I'll not put any wax in my ear, and only open me after we have crossed that island." When they were passing by that island, surely, when Odysseus heard the melodious voices, he was hypnotized and he wanted to break his bonds and jump into the water. Thankfully, he was so tightly tied up that he didn't. Right. And when they passed by this island and when they crossed it safely, he came back to his senses and the crew opened him. Now, this story actually tells us a lot of aspects about self-control that comes in, that we many times are frail towards these temptations that come into either trade or in terms of diet, in terms of cakes or desserts that come in. This also highlights an important bias or important emotion called the hot-cold empathy gap that leads to this lack of discipline.
The multi-talented Odysseus, we didn't know the other aspect of this side of Odysseus. So thank you for highlighting that also. You spoke about hot and cold empathy gap. It's quite a mouthful. Can you just simplify that a bit?
Professor George Lowenstein, he came out with this idea that the decisions we take are impacted by our state of mind. And he put distinctly two states of mind that we can be in. One is a cold state. Cold state is a very mindful, very rational state of mind where we reflect well on our decisions and take those decisions. And hot state is when we act impulsively. Now, this is a state when we don't give too much thought about our actions. We just react to how we feel at that time in the midst of a situation or so. Now, what he calls as an empathy gap between the two is that we can be in one of those two states, but it is difficult for us what we would feel in the other state. So when we are in a hot state, we cannot think like we would be in a cold state and vice versa. Let me again simplify this with a little better example. Suppose you are going to a supermarket to shop for ingredients and food for dinner on a Wednesday, say. So you're shopping on Saturday because it's a weekend, but the meal you're planning is on a Wednesday. If you go shopping when you're hungry on a Saturday, you will feel that you will buy more because you will feel, even on Wednesday, you will feel yourself as starving, or you'll think yourself as starving and I'll buy more.
Right.
If you go after a 7-course meal for shopping on a Saturday and you're feeling a little bloated, you can't imagine yourself starving on a Wednesday, so you'll shop less. So this is the hot-cold empathy gap, where during a planning stage or so, the state of mind, if it is cold, it is better. But in the hot state, and when you're doing something, you are more impulsive in your activity. And because you can't really change your mindset at that time, that creates this gap between your actions.
So, Nimesh, how does this empathy gap hurt our investment? I always thought empathy is a very positive emotion.
So empathy gap is a bit of worry.
Right.
It's a gap in a way between a planner and a doer. So that's what the hot and cold states matter. Now, let's take a few ways in which empathy gap can impact us. The first, obviously, everybody wants to create a nice investment plan in a cold state and decide that I'll be greedy when others are fearful and the valuations are attractive. I'll be fearful when others are greedy and say market is in a euphoric zone, so I will sell at that time. But when it comes to the actual situation, people end up doing the opposite. They kind of give in to greed, fear, and other emotions that impact their investments. The other impact of this gap is the investment horizon, what we plan. We tend to change it during the hot state. So in a cold state, we may think that we will be investing for the longer term because longer term investments give us good returns. In the hot state, we sometimes become envious of other traders doing well in short term, and then we try to do that and accommodate a shorter term horizon. Also, we start accommodating certain investments we would not take otherwise. So if you have a certain investment criteria, people dilute it during the hot state. That, okay, let me participate in the market and accommodate some of these investments which otherwise, according to your plan, you wouldn't have taken.
Right.
Benjamin Graham has a famous quote that the chief losses of investors come when they buy certain substandard securities during favorable market conditions. So bull market actually pressurize you to take up certain investment which you otherwise would not take, or the risk that you otherwise would not take. So these are some of the ways where in a hot state you may take decisions which may affect your investment portfolio.
Nimesh, looks like the hot state makes us vulnerable and weak to many different emotion that affects our returns. Can you do something about this?
Our hero Odysseus, the hero of our story, already gave us a couple of ideas. So one of the ideas is to cut yourself from the noise. So the sailors were told to put beeswax in their ear so that they don't get mesmerized by the voices that they are hearing. I know it is tough to do that, cut yourself off from the noise, but at least some of the measures we can take, like not watching the ticker all the time, and try to refresh or reevaluate your portfolio after a certain interval. Don't do it very, very frequently. The other more effective way of self-control is what Odysseus did to himself, that you tie yourself to a particular strategy. When we are planning in a cold state, an investment plan, also put pre-commitments in it that stop you from acting in an emotional state. These pre-commitments can be in terms of either, say, stop losses or action points at a particular time or at a particular price. So these are pre-commitments you put in the plan itself, that this is the time I should start trimming my portfolio, this is the time I should increase my allocation, so that you don't react as per the emotion at that point in time. You act according to the plan. Lock-ins are also important. Like, for example, closed-ended funds commit you for the longer term, so that's better. Right. SIPs are more systematic, and at every emotion, if you actually every month, if you start deciding how much to invest or no, it's better to do an SIP.
Right.
Because that kind of is the pre-commitment that you will keep investing no matter what the market is and take advantage of the volatility. Certain pre-commitments that can be used are when you're talking to some managements, you don't act immediately, or listen to the management, you don't act immediately, because sometimes managements are very positive, optimistic, and you have to finish your process before you actually act on those inputs. So those can be put in.
Right.
These lock-ins, these pre-commitments may feel a little restrictive at certain points, that you feel, oh, I'm restricting myself from acting in a certain way. But in the longer term, they are very, very helpful. So when you look back and see how much money you saved or how much better outcome you got because of these pre-commitments, you will be happy with what pre-commitments you put in the process. So I think that's the answer to handling the self-control part between hot and cold empathy gap.
It's very difficult to have that self-control.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. Read all scheme related documents carefully.